Damen und Herren, Madame and Monsieur, ladies and gentlemen, it is my utmost honor and pleasure to meet you at the second installment of All About Economy film meeting in Gdańsk. I would like especially thank for coming our honorable guests, that is Vice Rector of our University of Technology for Research and Science, Professor Dembiński. I'd like to invite Vice President of Gdańsk, Mr. Adam Aleksandrowicz. Our very special guest, we're honored to have him for the first time here at the University of Technology, Swiss Ambassador Jürgen Burri. Of course, I heartily welcome our today program's lecturers, Professor Dembiński and Professor André Bender.
So it's a great pleasure to be here for the second time. 2017 we were here, and it's a great pleasure to take part again in this festival or in this meeting, All About Economy film meeting. I think it's a very promising avenue for getting in touch with economic realities, looked also by an artistic eye on one side and from a scientific eye on another. So I have heard that the first part of the meeting today, this morning, went excellently. So thank you very much, Mr. Rector, Mr. President, Mr. Ambassador, for opening this festival and your kind words. So we have the pleasure, André Bender and myself, to provide you with some comments, some analysis about this film, which is the title is It is a Wonderful Life. We are looking for a while for optimistic film about finance. So we had to dig deep in the history, and we found a film of the 40s, and we are going to try to comment it. So André Bender is here with because of our friendship, long friendship. He was touring Poland, and a few days ago he called me up saying, "Are you maybe in Poland? I'm based in Geneva." And André told me, "I will be the next few days in Poland." So I said, "Well, come over to Gdańsk, and rather than having a monologue, let's have a dialogue around this film." So André will start his remarks, then I will continue on some issues, and then he will close. So André, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here today with you. And I'm a little wondering what I'm doing here, because I haven't been teaching for 15 years. You see, I'm a gray hair, old man, soon 80, but I have to speak in front of young students. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me, my dear Paul friend. So I saw the film, part of it, and he said a comment on that film. I will try to. And I think this film, you will see it later. It's very interesting from, I would say, social finance point of view, but also from a political point of view, you will see. And it makes the discussion maybe more interesting. I will just make 4 or 5 comments, maybe 5 comments. First comment on the social environment of this film. Frank Capra is born in 1897, I think, around the end of 19th century. So he's about the age of my parents, maybe the same, not the same age. Could be your grandparents or great-grandparents. But why do I say that? Because he's not so far away. It's not hundreds of years ago. It's just my parents' age. And that period is very interesting because Frank Capra is probably the son. He's born in Sicily. He came with probably with the parents. No, he's a little crate. Went to America, and so he's belonged to the first generation of these millions of people going away from Europe, from misery, to go in US, Brazil, from my sweet spot, from the Rhone River Valley. Then quite a lot of them flew to Brazil, to Argentina. Is that a noise there? Do you hear me nicely? Yeah. Because it's making quite strange noise. And what is interesting is that they didn't go to USA or to Argentina or to Brazil just to go around the world for fun, as we probably do now. Let's go to Europe, let's go to France. No, they went over there because they were dying of hunger here in Poland, in Ireland, even in Switzerland. Nice country, you say, Mr. Ambassador. But in the 19th century, they were starving also. So they went over there. That's basic environment of Frank Capra. And he probably remembered the life of his parents when he probably left the Sicilia to go to somewhere far away. That's the first. Don't remember that. My second remark would be about the life of the immigrants in US. As you know, immigrant life, whether it's in US, in Argentina, Brazil, wherever, was not very easy. It was, I would say it was hard, very hard, for most of them. Don't remember they had a lot of fun in US. Don't think they had a lot of fun in Argentina and Brazil. They had hard life for years and years, and some people had less hard life, but most of them had a very hard life. If you go back to US with that film, obviously with the World War I and II, industry has developed quite a lot. And, thanks to the war, it's terrible. But thanks to the war, American industry has developed a lot, and there's a very huge creation of value and jobs, and the creation of middle-class people. But don't think it's so much fun for everybody. There's a middle-class people, but there's a lot of people in stay poor and very poor, even in America. I would say mainly in America. But look in Argentina, people the great-grandson of the people who left from Poland and from Switzerland living in Argentina, they're not all millionaires. You can go and see. It's a hard life moving out from the country. Except if you go to Switzerland, as the ambassador said before, it would be great. That, I would say my fourth remarks. It would be about that vicious circle, which is about where the poor people are living in. When you live in your country, you go to USA, either you maybe get rich, but most of them, they're maybe around the middle class. And the poor people stay poor. And it is a vicious circle. You poor, then you dependent, there's a created dependency with banks, with all kind of, with your job. And then you don't get richer. Very often you get poorer than before. And that's one of the main problems to solve. You work in economics, in management. How to solve that problem? How to help the poor people to be less poor? Because when you look at the statistics, it's frightening. How is it possible in America, that big country, such a rich country, where more than half of the people are poor? There's a problem. There's a big problem. How is that possible? And then I went to Argentina, which is the proportion of the Argentinian people who are living very nicely, that you guess. And there is one man who has trying at the end of the 19th century to find a solution to cut that circle. That's what Mr. Raiffeisen, Friedrich Wilhelm Raiffeisen, who wanted to break that terrible circle, poverty, dependency, poverty. And he created that cooperative bank system at the village, little town level. And which was the main objective? Is to give the possibility to the poor people to get the ownership of the land or the ownership of the house. Say, well, so what? Give the answer? Give the answer. Because if you don't have any ownership, if the poor people don't have the ownership of the land they're working on, or the house they're living in with the family, they will stay poor because the owner will have a lot of fun. He's going to be richer and richer by setting up the rent for the land, the farmer land, for the house, in such a way that the poor will stay just poor. Maybe a little, maybe a little more, but not too much. So if you look around, it's very frightening to see that you cannot go away from that circle. If you get a little richer, and then they're rising your rent, and then you stay poor. And that's if you have a thesis, maybe you have a collective thesis to find a solution. How to allow the poor people to get ownership and to have the ownership of the house and the land. That's the only solution to get away from poverty, the famous circle of the poverty, dependency, and then extreme poverty. And that's what Mr. Raiffeisen tried to do at the same time, at that time. And but one of the main problems to solve in this kind of cooperative banks to help people, we can to see that in the film, is the risk analysis. How? Somebody has to bear the risk. Who is going to take the risk? If I'm going to lend you $1,000, I take a risk. Who's going to take the risk? If you don't pay, I need some guarantee. But you don't have anything, you're very poor. So how to solve that problem? And that's the main, one of the main problem. And with the Raiffeisen system, or like in Tontine in Africa, they have to create little solution to lend money to the poor people and to control the risk and manage the risk. And how far? Which are the criteria? If your criteria are only financial criteria, you will never lend to the poor. So you have to find a solution. I don't have the answer. But I have an interesting story. My dad he was a farmer, like so many others. He was a farmer, a member of the committee of the Raiffeisen system in my village. So he got probably some loan from the Raiffeisen group. And the Raiffeisen group in my village was just, it was the church-goers group, you know. There was another bank for the non-goer church group. So they knew each other. And I had a meeting, the group committee of the bank, every Sunday, I think, or every other Sunday after the church. I go and talk about the risk, this man, that man, very interesting. And one day I asked him, because the boss, the president was making politics, and I told him, why do you like that man so much? I think that's a very interesting man. He said, André, one day I went to see after the church, and I said, I need 200 Swiss francs, that make any difference, you know. It's not too much. Not maybe a month's salary. Now we say that I need $2,000. And for 200 francs, I remember, at that time. I said, I need 200 francs. Can the bank loan me 200 francs more? And the man said, Anthony, I can't. You reach the limit. And he said, take this, that's 200 francs, that's my money, and I take the risk, give me back the money when you can. So, that's interesting, because how can the bank create criteria and then to respect the criteria till the end? That's a problem. And you know, so you probably know that the financial industry, they try to solve the problem by selling the risk. You probably know that more than me, because I haven't been at university for more than 10 years now. But you know, that's the idea of selling the risk, to pass the risk to another person, saying, okay, this doesn't make a difference. If you're not happy with it, just sell to somebody else. And finally, but you cut the relationship between the loaner and the man who received the money. You just sell. But this doesn't solve the problem, it creates a problem. And as we know, the subprime crisis in 2008 is due to that. Because by selling the risk, you don't know too much the amount of risk you buy. You know, mix up in a little potato bag, and you say, that amount of risk is worth so much, but you don't know so very well what you buy and what you can do with that. And they say, that doesn't make any difference if you don't know what you buy, just sell to somebody else. But this is getting bubbling stuff, and then the 2008 crisis is obvious. And so, please make some research, and please find more adequate solution to solve the risk analysis and to help poor people and yes, to acquire property. Thank you.
Thank you very much, André. It was, I did not introduce André properly. He was one of the first Swiss scholars to have an American diploma in finance in the 60s, and he developed modern finance in Geneva, especially at the University of Geneva and in many other universities in Switzerland. So listening at him when he speaks about trading risk, transferring risk, and the limits of it, it's really very, very enlightening and drawing on the experience of his village. Lot of this you're going to see in this movie. So I have a few comments to build on what André said 2 minutes ago. First, the title. I wonder if it's a tale about happy finance, or is it reality of happy finance? So we went on discussing it for a few hours. We are not sure if it ever existed what you are going to see in the film. But let's take it as at least as a possibility, and try to identify what are the ingredients of this kind of happy finance. We are in the 40s. The end of the film is just after the Second World War. So it's the time of peace, not only in Europe, but also in the United States. There is the beginning of the Pax Americana. There is the beginning of the American way of life spreading across the world. So you have some elements of it, you can feel it a little bit towards the end of the film. So the context is, I think it's important to replace it. Then there is another important issue, and André mentioned it in his remarks, it is the question of purpose. The people that are dealing in finances this field, most of them have a purpose. The purpose is to allow the poor people, lower middle class, to access to ownership of land and real estate. So it's not finance for finance, it's not finance for just bottom line results, it's finance for people. So I think it's an important ingredient of happy finance. The purpose is more important than the need. And of course, finance here is seen in the perspective of human life. It accelerates, it's allowed young people or middle-aged people to have their home before they are too old, and they maybe could have saved the money, but the problem when they have saved the money, their life is gone. So we can speak about finance as an accelerator of life projects, and you will see it very clearly in this field. So the other point which is very important is the community. You will see it very strongly in the field. And the bank finance is embedded in the community, and when we say community, we also mean somewhere a level of solidarity, because we know each other, because we share something. André was mentioning the church-goers bank on one side, the non-church-goers bank on the other. Different communities, different places and levels of solidarity. The idea of face-to-face, extremely important. It's much more important than know your customer. It's to have empathy without being too friendly, because the banks, the risk assessment, the balance sheets have the rules, and these rules cannot be broken by just because of the friendship. And I think the story of the father of André is wonderful. When somebody says, I can lend you as a friend, but I cannot lend you as a bank manager. The bank cannot lend you, but I can do it. So this duality is very important to respect and to understand. Trust. Trust is fundamental, is essential, and you see it coming back many times in the field. Trust of clients towards the institution, and trust of the managers toward the clients. You will see also elements of distrust, because there is another financial person in the field, not only the bank manager of the community, but the kind of predatory finance that you will see on the horizon on more than one occasion. Trust in the leadership. Why? The leadership of the bank. Trust by the community, by the clients, by the savers. Why? Because there is a purpose. And his idea is very clearly articulated throughout the field. Just we have finance has to serve. So the point is very far away from what used to be the case of modern finance. Euphoric finance is to build on short loops. The savers know the borrowers more or less perfectly. These short loops have their limits. There is an important element in building them is the level of remuneration of bank management. Not skyrocketing remuneration, but something normal, acceptable also to the community. Something of what the managers need not to be shy, because they're having the same living as other professionals in the small town. So, short loops, and as it has been said, community banking is something that is probably a byproduct of industrial evolution. If you look at Europe, you will see that in second half of the 20th century, the same ideas emerged in many countries. In Poland, Kasy Stefczyka, in Germany and Austria, Raiffeisen groups, and the Raiffeisen movement first started from one person and then it spread across many countries, especially German-speaking countries. In the UK, in Scotland, Duncan was a pastor who started it already in 1830s. So the idea of savings of the others can be used to accelerate the life cycle of those that are not able to save and to need a roof. Community banking is also the tool of emancipation, and I think that one has to stress also that there was a Christianity was advocating the idea of helping the poor out of poverty, especially the Rerum Novarum Encyclica of the 1891. So leadership in this piece here, you will see it transformative. It's a social vision behind it, not only good business, but also transformation of life of the community. So happy finance, I think there are two or three other ingredients that we can mention, but also some limits. And the limits have been mentioned by André. Risk-taking. How much risk can we take, and what are the limits of growth? Because the community banking is limited by the community. And once everybody is a saver, and everybody has a house, we can say, well, the job is done. What should we do else? So if you address it from the perspective of growth, well, there are limits, and these limits have to be broken or surpassed in one way or another. And these are the movements of deregulation, especially in the US, in the 80s, in the 90s, that allowed community banks to expand their area of activity. And there is another limit, which is the confrontation between this happy, quote-unquote, finance and what you will see in the movie, the predatory finance. The predatory finance of the bad capitalist, in a really caricature of capitalism, saying, well, I want to control everything. And he says it explicitly, I want to control in order to keep people just above the level of poverty, so they can pay rent, even higher rents, but they will never become autonomous, so they will be always my forced clients. So this competition between the happy finance on one side and the predatory finance on the other is very clearly shown in the film, because you see at one moment the happy finance man has a small problem, and the predatory finance is waiting like this for the opportunity to take everything over. So happy finance, it will not be, if it's not built on a very solid business case, will not probably survive by just goodwill. It has to be more than this. It has to be competence, professionalism, and also good regulations. So the question is still open. Finance as servant or finance as deceiver? I think it's an important question that runs across the history of financial activity. So this is the first part that relates immediately to what we have seen in the film. But now try to bridge, in a few words, let's try to bridge the period of the 40s, or even the interwar period that we will see in the film, of community finance, with our present world of finance. And I think it is important to mention that there was a revolution. This revolution, I was referring to André Tigris in the 60s, in the 70s, it was the moment of the revolution of finance. Finance as knowledge, as science, as a set of practices, started to develop at this moment, thanks to a couple of intellectual breakthroughs, especially in terms of risk measurement. And this idea that we can not only think about risk, but also measure risk, was absolutely fundamental for the new finance, the modern finance that we know. So the roles of finance during the last half century have changed fundamentally. They used to be, and probably many of your textbooks you will still find it, what is the function of finance? Is to generate savings and to channel these savings to investment. That's the part of the investment, housing financing land ownership financing, and so on and so on. Yes, financial system is about payments, of course. But what is new since the 60s, 70s, is the new function, which is the risk management. Once we can measure risk, we can manage risk. That, at least, is the idea. We can measure risk. That means that we can trade risk. We can package risk. We can put them into products. We can give a price on the markets to the products, and so on and so on and so on. So some of the limits on which that are evident in the field, because the small enterprise cannot grow, here in modern times could be overcome because there is a way of transferring risk, and there is, if you transfer risk, it allows you to take more business on your balance sheet. So the functions of finance have changed, and the growth of financial activities in the last half a century, in terms of statistical terms, the growth of financial activity to a large extent is due to these risk management functions, which were not present as such in the traditional financial activities. There is another, I think, important underlying difference between the old way of old, of course, traditional, let's say, as you will see it in the field to some extent, to conduct business of finance, and the modern one. And the crisis of 2007-8 has shown some limits, has put some limits, has started to put some question marks about the way modern finance works. But this contrast between traditional way of conducting financial business and the modern way, I think we can sum it up by using two words: transaction and relation. Relation is something in which there is a dynamics. In the relation you have many steps. You have today, you have tomorrow, you have after tomorrow. Some of the financial, not only, but some of the relation collapse, other blossom. And you have this idea that one step is preparing somewhere the next step. And a little bit like when you walk, you are never in a relationship, you are never in equilibrium. Because from one, you move the weight of your body from one feet to another. And it's all the time, it's moving. It's the same in the relation. So relation, from perspective of economics, is not very efficient, because it's always something that is not accounted for, that is not paid for. But the strength of the relation is that it sets the ground for the next step, for the future. It's true in finance, it's true in business, it's true in personal life. When we move to transaction, transaction is something which is very much more mechanic. It's something you go to a shop, you buy a bottle of water, you leave with the bottle of water, and that's done. You have left some pieces of money, and you left with water, and the transaction is perfectly equilibrated. There is no specific reason for you to return. There is no specific reason for the seller to look after you. It changes today with social media and so on. But transaction is perfectly efficient, but is absolutely sterile in terms of preparing the future. Relation is not so efficient from economic perspective, but has this future potential. So building finance on relations is maybe less efficient in the short term, but should be and was much more efficient in the long run. Transactions are very efficient in the short term, but time to time they also kill trust, which is another part of the conversation that we could have. So we have been for 40 years, since the mid-70s, in the period of financiarization. Financiarization, with this idea of transaction, took possession of financial activities to a large extent and was spreading to the other parts of the economy, and today we see it very clearly in technological companies. So I'm going to skip this slide and moving to this one. I have been working for many years on the financial crisis, even before the financial crisis. And I think that the financialization as a process, financialization which we can define as using the conceptual tools of finance, especially in terms of risk management, not only in the sphere of finance, but also in other spheres of business management, has opened the door, has created what I call 4 confusions. And these 4 confusions are, you would say maybe they are very abstract, but you will see in the film that these confusions play a crucial role in the tale of happy finance. So first confusion is between the real, the reality, and the virtuality. When the credit is granted on a face-to-face relation, when the credit is granted to build the house that in 6 months or 2 years will be there is a dimension of reality. When the credit is granted for generating a flow of income that is somewhere on an Excel spreadsheet, this reality evaporates. There is still the idea that the reality is not so immediate. You cannot touch it. And with more and more sophisticated instruments, financial instruments, that are most of them abstract, the relation between what we do here and what happens on the other side of the line of causality is not clear. We don't understand it. Now authors speak about moral distance. We are not able to understand the consequences of what we do. So the confusion between, are we finance people working on the real part of the world, or are we working on the virtual dimension of something? Excel spreadsheets do not help us to have a clarity on this issue. So it's confusion. We can get out of the confusion, but the confusion is there. There is another confusion, which I think is important, is confusion with the timeline. I said before that credit is a way of accelerating human projects. But the counterpart of it is that we have to sell somewhere a part of our future, because we commit to pay for 10 years, for 20 years, for 15 years. So we have the future, but the future is not fully open. It's somewhere mortgaged against the credit. So where are we, in the present or in the future? So financial techniques allow us to move from the present to the future and back, adding a price, adding a risk premium, and this produces a confusion in relation to the timeline. The third confusion, which is I think very important, is the confusion between means and ends. I mentioned, and Professor Bender also mentioned a few minutes ago, the purpose. What is important is to get in the field and in other financial activities, time to time, to achieve something. To achieve something that is not financial, but to which finance is a tool. When we look at financial activity only as being an activity of profit generation, we focus on the mean, but we forget about the end. And this is a disequilibrating moment in every human activity if we concentrate on the means and forget why we do it, with all the underlying questions about the quality of what we're going to achieve. So the confusion about ends and means is something that has been brought by financial euphoria, by mathematization of financial activities to a large complexity of these activities. And the fourth and last confusion is the confusion between the abstract market mechanisms and the human person. We often read, time to time, write, the market says, the market decides, the market punishes or the market rewards. Who is the market? Did you ever meet the market somewhere? Market is done of human decisions. And behind every decision there is somebody even knocking on the keyboard. But it's still a human person. If it's not directly the human person that is knocking on the keyboard, at least there is somebody who designed the algorithm or the robot that is touching the keyboard. So confusion about the abstraction of the mechanism of market and the reality of human decision makers and human assessment and human judgment. So the question is, we have been far away in the journey towards euphoric finance. I'm not saying unhappy finance, I'm not saying predatory finance, but euphoric finance. We have been a long way in this direction, and the question is, and that's the question that is put to us by the financial crisis, to what extent happy finance, as the one that you have seen here, that you are going to see in the film, to what extent this kind of finance is possible. And to close this short talk, I will address three ways or four ways out. First, and it's very important, to try to restore the balance between transactions and relations. I'm not saying that relations are good and transactions are bad. I'm just saying that in social life, in economic life, in financial life, you need both. You need things that are very short and efficient, but you need also things that lay the perspective for longer-term, medium-term development. Today, my understanding is that we have been very, very far in the development of transaction, and some of this transaction movement has been killing relations. And its trust is embedded in relation. It's not embedded in transactions. That's another conversation. So the second element on which we have to work, and probably you have to work more than us, which are old and about to retire, which is the complexity of institutions. More complex is the institutional environment, the complexity of the term of the firm, less you understand what are the ultimate consequences of what you do. And this is something, as I mentioned before, which is feeding this confusion between ends and the means. Finally, the third point which is important, that relates to our professions, which are the professions of teachers, of researchers, of students, of PhD students, is to think about what kind of human face is embedded in our models. We design for what kind of persons? Do we design them for the Homo economicus-like persons, or do we design them for a much more sophisticated, independent, aspiring to freedom, to reason kind of people? Anthropology is something that has been left aside by much of recent economic production, with the exception maybe to this year Nobel Prize winners, and to has been totally left aside from recent financial production. So there are good reasons to study these fields and to try to bring human beings back into our models. I'm not saying that we have to get rid of mathematics, not at all. I'm just saying that we have to use purposefully the mathematical apparatus and mathematical tools. So, and this is the 4 or 5 elements that I wanted to share with you as avenues to bring happy finance back into life. Thank you very much. I'm sure that you want to add something, André.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. You said everything. I think you brought a very unsolved problem, and I think we cannot solve that problem. Is the problem the risk? The risk. How to solve that problem? I think as Paul said, the sophisticated models who help to, to discuss and how to pass the risk from one person of a group of person to another. But they won't solve the problem. The problem is how to help people to finance their activity or their family home or land when they don't have any money. So asking the bank to lend is crazy, because who is taking the risk? The bankers? It's crazy. I made an analysis long ago in Switzerland, but small business. No? I did that with students. And we studied the balance sheet, the small firm in Switzerland. And we arrived to the conclusion that they have no private equity. They didn't have any equity, just that. So we cannot complain if the banks don't want to lend more money. And when we talked to the owners of this firm, they said that they was complaining, all of them were complaining. The bank never lend any money. I said, they are right. Why should they lend money to a bank that don't have any equity? They said, so you have to solve that problem. And if you go back to the film, there's a very interesting too. No, the big man, that awful man, owning about everything. And he doesn't want to help the poor people. And he said to the nice guy who want to help, he said, you're crazy. You're dreaming. Poor people are crazy. Poor people are drinking. They don't know how to think. They don't know how to work. Should not? No. It's much better that I'm the boss. I will own everything, and I will take care of them. And I will be the boss. And they will all poor, and I will be a happy man. Doesn't work. But and it's just a small story. Because the banks do the same thing all the time. And in a small village in my Switzerland, the village of my mother, the mountain, about 100 people living there. And one day I walked, that's during the 60s, or 70s, I think 70s. Walk around the village and talk to a lady there. Hey, Martin, how are you? Yes, fine. And I said, yeah, that's a very nice wooden chalet there, that little barn in very nice. I said, but who is owning that little barn? And she started almost crying. She said, that's our towards our chalet. But one day, I remember when I was young, my father said, tomorrow the bank, I didn't manage to pay the bankers. I only 100 francs or whatever. I didn't have the money. So tomorrow is going to be the owner of the little barn who was in as a warranty. And then at the end of the day, my mother said to my father, he said, oh, you have to go to empty the barn, take off the tools, because they're probably going to take everything. So my father said, oh, I go tomorrow morning very early at 6 o'clock. So he went at 6 o'clock. But about the chains all around the barn, and the tools were inside. So how to prevent that? How to solve that problem? You cannot complain the banker about a bad guy. But you cannot take away so easily the material the farmer needs to live on. So it's very difficult. I hope you will find some solution. You're young, your solution to solve the problem, the risk analysis, and to allow people to buy and finance investment. Find a solution. You're young, you have time. Thank you.